We've got new information on the investigation into the shooter as well. CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst John Miller is with us now. Great to see you this morning, John.
You too.
What are you learning? What's the latest here?
So the investigation moves forward a little bit every day. Let's kind of go through where they are as of right now. Interesting facts. The suspect late last week told his employers at the assisted care place where he works as a dietary specialist, I need Saturday off.
Premeditation.
That's right. I have something to do that day, but I'll be in on Sunday. I don't know if that was just to cover, not take attention away from that, I'll be in on Sunday, or now we look at mindset, did he expect to survive and escape? The other question that was swirling around for so long, and we've all heard this, even on our own air, is how did he get on that rooftop? We know he purchased a 5-foot ladder that morning, Saturday, at 9 a.m. at Home Depot near his house. That ladder has never been found to date, but the investigation has developed that he climbed up onto an air conditioner handler, and you can see that they're all around these buildings, and then hoisted himself onto a very low roof that's in the center of that complex, almost kind of in a courtyard, which would have been away from the view of a lot of people. Before that, and this is interesting, he had already attracted the attention of security people at the screening area for the rally. He had been walking by the magnetometers with a rangefinder in his hand. Now, a rangefinder is something that shooters use to measure the distance in long shots. Golfers use them too. Looks like a small pair of binoculars, but if you're a police officer or someone who knows about firearms, you'll know what that is when you see it. He was carrying it in his hand and kind of circling around the mag area. There's conflicting information as to whether he went through the mags, which means he was unarmed, but he had this in his hand and had to go through screening, or whether he just stayed outside, but they started looking at him. But then he leaves the area and, you know, goes out of view from that inner perimeter. So that is just interesting that he was already on the radar a little bit, which happens often in these things. They look at somebody, then they leave the secure area. The rangefinder comes up again, though, because as he gets to that roof, they see him looking through the rangefinder, and one sniper team is looking at him, looking at them through the rangefinder. But this all now starts to happen very quickly, because now a police officer's coming up the ladder behind him. We know about that confrontation with the firearm. Then he comes up and, you know, fires that shot. Those sniper teams are trying to determine and talking to each other about, who is this guy? Is he law enforcement? Is he part of one of the other sniper teams that's supposed to be in that building? And then that first shot fires, and then everything goes very quickly. So we're learning kind of a lot about those moments leading up to it.
And every second there counts. John Miller, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much. Sarah?
It's fascinating reporting. Thank you, John. All right. The man who was shot and killed at Saturday's rally, Corey Comparatore, was honored at the RNC with a standing ovation last night. He died trying to shield his family from the bullets. Comparatore's private funeral is set for tomorrow in Sarver, Pennsylvania. We're also learning more about the 2 other men at the rally who were shot and injured. They are both now in stable condition. James Koppenhaver's family is thanking everyone for their support as a 74-year-old recovers from what they're calling life-threatening injuries. And the Marine Corps League of Pennsylvania says 57-year-old David Dutch needed 2 surgeries after being shot in the liver and the chest. Both men in stable condition this morning.
The FBI and U.S. Department of Homeland Security are warning there could be follow-up attacks after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump last week. In a joint bulletin, the agencies noted chatter in some online communities, either threatening or encouraging violent follow-up attacks. Officials fear other campaign events could also be targeted throughout the election season. Authorities are also concerned about hoax bomb threats, reports of fake crimes to trigger a law enforcement response, or doxing of election officials in an attempt to disrupt political rallies and events. And we are learning more about what the shooter did in the days leading up to Donald Trump's rally. Officials say Thomas Matthew Crooks requested Saturday off from his job at a nursing home because he, quote, had something to do. Crooks told his co-workers he'd be back the following day. While speaking at the Republican National Convention on Tuesday, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson promised the investigation into the shooter would be thorough.
The House is conducting an immediate and thorough investigation of these tragic events. And that work has already begun. The American people deserve to know the truth, and we will ensure accountability. I promise you that. I promise you that.
The director of the U.S. Secret Service tells CNN they were solely responsible for implementing and executing security at Donald Trump's rally last week. This comes amid questions on how the shooter was able to gain access to a rooftop from where he attempted to assassinate Trump. CNN's Danny Freeman has more details on the investigation.
On Tuesday, we started to get some answers to some of the biggest questions that we've been wondering about this investigation and this attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump, but there are still many things that we don't know. But let me run through what we do know at this point. Let's start first with Thomas Matthew Crooks. That's the 20-year-old shooter from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. We do know that on Friday, before the shooting, we believe that he went to his sportsman's club and actually practiced shooting on that rifle range at the sportsman club not too far from his home. We then know on Saturday morning, the shooter went to Home Depot and purchased a ladder. Not long after that, we know that the shooter then went to a gun shop and purchased 50 rounds of ammunition. Then law enforcement sources have been telling CNN the shooter drove to Butler, Pennsylvania, to the Trump rally that occurred behind me back on Saturday. And the shooter actually was spotted by law enforcement at one point looking suspicious near the metal detectors, but then went relatively undetected, as far as we understand, until later on when he ultimately fired those shots towards former President Donald Trump. But here's what we still don't know. We still are no closer to understanding what may have motivated this particular shooting. The FBI is saying that it has done over 100 interviews of witnesses at the scene, law enforcement officers, family and friends of Mr. Crooks. They also searched the home and the car of the shooter. They also looked at the past internet search history of the shooter, and they actually were able to crack into the shooter's phone. Still, though, no evidence pointing to any ideological reasons that would have led him up to that rooftop to fire those shots at the former president. And now I want to turn to the investigation and this back and forth between U.S. Secret Service and local law enforcement agencies that were on the ground here as well. We have learned from law enforcement sources that there was a sniper team actually inside of the complex where the shooter Crooks was on top of the roof, but these snipers, they were actually looking through second-story windows towards the crowd, not actually on what was happening above them on the roof. This comes as Secret Service told us that they were not responsible for sweeping and clearing the area that contained this particular building because it was outside of the perimeter that they were focused on where the Trump campaign event was happening. The Secret Service said that was law enforcement's responsibility. However, we have heard from a number of local law enforcement agencies here in this particular area, including the Pennsylvania State Police, who not only said that they gave Secret Service all of the resources that they asked for, but specifically said in these types of situations, during these types of events, Secret Service is the lead agency. Then, 48 hours after the shooting on Saturday evening, we finally heard the first comments on the record in a media interview from the director of the Secret Service, who said explicitly, "The buck stops with me." So it's unclear if we're going to see more back and forth between local law enforcement and between Secret Service, but we still don't have an answer to the question of why that particular roof was left unattended. Danny Freeman, CNN, Butler, Pennsylvania.